these playoffs have really sparked a bunch of different things and questions in the offseason, including a big move the other night when Oklahoma City and Billy Donovan parted ways. We know the Sixers need a coach. We know the Bucks got eliminated. Budenholzer, will he be available? Let's get the latest on the coaching search for the 76ers and other Sixers front office news. Michael Kaskey Blomain, CBS Sports, covers the NBA, covers the 76ers, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And, Michael, I guess the first question would be, at this point, do you put a favorite in the clubhouse for that Sixers job, or does the Billy Donovan thing change stuff? And now, with the Bucks getting knocked out, would the Sixers be interested in Budenholzer if he became available? How do you kind of take the temperature of this Sixers opening?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And everything I've heard is that it's still pretty wide open at this point, and they're trying to cast a pretty wide net when it comes to all the guys they're looking for. And a lot of the people, they're interested in potentially are still tied. Obviously Ty Lue was a name that, came out pretty early on. He's still coaching with the Clippers. Adrian Griffin, an assistant with the Raptors, is someone I've been told to keep an eye on. He was, he had 2 interviews with the Sixers back in 2013 when they went with Brett Brown, but they were, really intrigued by what he brought to the table. And I've been told that, a lot of that intrigue still hangs around. So, I think they're doing their due diligence. Donovan I haven't specifically heard that they are going to interview him, but that's definitely another name that, might make some sense for them to at least look into. So, I think it's a situation where it's going to be at least several more weeks before, any sort of decision is made.
Is it important to hire the coach before any sort of roster moves are made, or do you think this organization is going to try and, figure out some roster moves before a head coach is? I mean, I know it's tough to do with these contracts, but, I bring that up because obviously a new voice, a new head coach, you would think would have some say on what type of roster is in place, no?
Yeah, that's a great point, Brody. I think one of the biggest, to me, one of the most interesting things is Elton told us after Brett was fired the next day that, he was going to be doing a full evaluation of the front office and that there would likely be some, resulting changes coming from there too, that it wouldn't just stop at Brett. And, if that is the case, you're wondering, who's kind of involved in making some of these roster decisions right now. You would think to get your ducks in a row, the first thing you would want to do would be, the front office in order and then, a coach and then a roster. But, the Sixers have done everything pretty much backwards, it seems, for the past couple of years. So at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up making some major, potentially trying to make some roster moves before a coach was put into place or before, some changes were made to the front office. But there's, a whole lot of questions floating around for them from the front office all the way down to the roster. And I think at this point, they're all still, pretty much up in the air.
Yeah, Michael, I know Lou was originally the guy that was tied to it the most. And then there was a report, the couple of minutes after Billy Donovan, and the Oklahoma City Thunder decided to separate. Which of those candidates do you think is a better choice, or is there someone else that you like more?
I think out of those two, Ty Lue would be a better candidate. Not anything against Billy Donovan, but I think Lue has, the pedigree of a champion, not only as a coach, but obviously he was a guy that, a lot of the guys knew from his time in the league. He won a couple of rings with the Lakers, the Kobe and Shaq Lakers back in the, early 2000s. And then he took the Cavs to 3 straight finals, obviously one with LeBron and Kyrie. And I think that, he had at least the type of, pedigree and personality that some of these young players on the Sixers, mainly, Joel and Ben, would probably respond to and appreciate and listen to. So I think that, that's probably what he has going for him a little bit more over Billy Donovan. But, to me, there's no clear favorite. And I think that was something that you and I had both said a bunch of times, Mike, when you're going to fire, which, at this point was something that I think most of us, accept was something that needed to be done. But it's not like there was a lot of great, people waiting in the wing that just jumped off the page at you that was like, this guy would 100% take this team to the next level. I think there's a lot of different options, and I really don't know which way they're going to go with this direction.
Yeah, and I know Brooklyn went with Steve Nash, kind of an outside the box, no coaching experience at all. Would it be surprising if the Sixers went down that road and found a guy who was a former player that was, kind of off the radar that they brought in, as opposed to a recycled guy who has already coached in this league. You got Ty Lue, you got Billy Donovan. Then you go down to even further recycled guys like the Van Gundys and the Mark Jacksons, guys who have been out of the game for a while. So of the three categories, a recently fired guy, a guy who hasn't been in the league for a while, or some off the radar guy, which candidate type fits the Sixers' need the most?
I think either of the first two, Mike. I would be pretty surprised if they did go in the direction of the Nets, like you said, and kind of go with someone that doesn't have a pedigree or a history in the coaching ranks. Given, I think the embarrassment, I guess, for lack of a better word, that the front office and the organization is feeling right now after their disappointing season and after seeing how the deals for Horford and Harris just don't look great in hindsight. I think they are looking for someone that has, a track record in this league and kind of has proven, whether that's someone that was just fired or someone that a Stan Van Gundy, for example, that's been, out of a job for a little bit of time. I think they will be looking to bring someone in that has a bit of a background and is kind of a known commodity. And I think the fact that the Nets ended up going with Steve Nash, if anything, makes the Ty Lue possibility a little bit stronger. The Nets were obviously another team that were rumored to be interested in Lue. And I thought that seemed kind of likely, just given the history there between Kyrie and Ty, that they both enjoyed their time together in Cleveland. But once, Brooklyn went in a different direction, it seems like to me, if I were Ty Lue, the Sixers job is probably the most enticing, at this point. So if anything, I think that makes it seem even a little bit more likely that ultimately Ty could be the guy.
What about promoting their assistant? I know that's been in the talks, and I wonder maybe going down any sort of assistant road is possible because, who was Nick Nurse before Nick Nurse went to Toronto, right? You didn't really know what Brad Stevens was going to be in Boston, and I just feel maybe that there are plenty of other options out there that you just don't know about because you don't know the name, yet they're very capable of getting the job done.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that Ime Udoka is definitely going to get a legitimate look at that job. He's a guy that, other organizations are potentially interested in. So, the Sixers would be, foolish not to do their own due diligence. Obviously, they're familiar with him. To me, it just seems like they're probably looking for more of a fresh start. They're trying to kind of move on from the Brett Brown era and a past. It doesn't seem like, they would want to promote someone directly that worked directly under Brett for the past few years. And also it seems like, a lot of times that type of situation, Nick Nurse was a little bit different in Toronto, but a lot of times when an assistant steps up in a situation where there's not, pressure necessarily to win immediately, they might have a little bit of time to kind of ease into things, work on a roster and kind of build for the future, where the Sixers situation is whoever's stepping into this role is going to have immediate expectations, to not only get to the playoffs, but go further and do better than they did under Brett Brown, which means, conference finals or bust. And that's, a lot of pressure to put on a head coach. And I think for that reason, they might not look at, their own assistant or a first time guy. And instead that's, why they might be looking for someone that has a little bit more experience.
All right. Chris Paul's name has been discussed, something that was reported also that the Sixers have seriously debated adding Chris Paul. I know the Sixer fan out there would say, we'll trade Tobias Harris, trade Al Horford. Easier said than done. Does Oklahoma City want either one of those guys? Do they seem like a good trade partner for a deal with Chris Paul?
I don't see it, Mike. Obviously, if you're the Sixers at this point, you would do it. And it's kind of ironic because it's something that should have been done, in the past. Not Chris Paul specifically, but they could have tried to go after him last summer with that money or another guard instead of spending it all on, Horford and Tobias, two guys that really just don't complement Ben and Joel. But to me, it just seems like if the Thunder are going to be doing a rebuild, which it seems, that's what they're going to be doing, moving on from Billy Donovan, they kind of overachieved this season. I don't think they're letting, how well they played this season kind of, fool them into thinking that they're further along in the process of contention than they actually are. So I think that they're going to be starting over. And at that point, I just don't know why they would be interested in, 3 more years of a 34-year-old Al Horford or 4 more years of Tobias Harris at huge numbers when they're looking to go, in a different direction. So ideally, it would work. You could trade Tobias and Josh Richardson and throw in a couple picks and take on Chris Paul's salary, it could work, but I just don't see, why at that point the Thunder would be wanting to do that. If they had signed Horford to maybe a 2-year deal and he only had a year remaining, that's a lot more feasible. But 3 years for, the size of that contract for a team that's looking to start over, it just doesn't seem like it's something that could happen feasibly to me.
Michael Kaskey Blomain, MKB, is with us. What about the possibility of some front office changes, not including Elton Brand, and how that could affect the Sixers moving forward in a positive or negative way?
That's kind of what I'm waiting for, mainly, Mike. After Brett was fired and Elton held that press conference and talked about how he was going to be, doing an evaluation of the front office. That's been, the main Sixers-related news I've been waiting to hear. I think a lot of people are ready to move on from, Alex Rucker, Ned Cohen, the assistant GM and the president of basketball ops that are holdovers from the Colangelo era. That, it's always been a little bit shrouded in mystery exactly how much influence they've had in some of the basketball decisions that have been made over the past couple of years. But, they are a common denominator in terms of, all the moves that have been made over the past few years. They've been in place. And, it's clear that Elton's not going anywhere, at least in the short term. Ownership is basically, giving him the job of cleaning up the mess that he helped create, could kind of even use him as a scapegoat if they want to. But to me, I think that it's time to move on from those other two, and probably more than that. And to me, that's a move that you want to make, like we were talking about a little earlier. I think you would want to try to get a new front office structure in place before you make huge decisions, such as, going after a Chris Paul trade or any other trades you might pursue. So to me, that's the news that I'm waiting to hear. I think that's the thing that we should expect most soon from now from the Sixers in terms of potential changes, so they could kind of hit the ground running once the season ends and free agency opens up.
More tradable, Horford or Harris?
Honestly, I do think it's Horford. Obviously, there's one less year on the contract, and I think that he's a guy that a lot of teams still think that there's value for. Whereas not that Tobias is a bad player, but he's clearly overpaid for the skill set he brings to the table. Al Horford's a guy that obviously had a rough season in Philadelphia, but he's still really highly regarded around the league. And I think a lot of the executives understand that he was in a situation in Philadelphia that wasn't ideal and didn't necessarily maximize his skill set. And I think there's teams that, especially rebuilding teams throughout the league, that could use a veteran presence and also a big guy that's still productive and capable of giving numbers. So I think it'll be tough. And obviously any deal you make to get rid of the Horford contract, it's going to cost you something. Now, whether that's Matisse, whether that's a few first and second round picks mixed together, it's going to be something. But I do think ultimately they will be able to move it. It's just going to be a matter of, what they're able to get in return.
He's Michael Kaskey Blomain. He covers the NBA for CBS Sports and the Sixers, and you can follow him at The Real Mike KB as the NBA playoffs have been fantastic. I don't know, do you like the bubble, the fact that it's all neutral?
Yeah, I think it's made for, really exciting playoff games and made it a little bit more or a little bit less predictable in a way in terms of, there's no home court. So it's easy to say, if this team is going to be playing at home, they're probably going to win. It's just, every 48 hours, the teams are back out on the same court. And I think it's just, you get to see just the basketball and how good these teams are without the external factors that we usually see in arenas.
MKB, always a pleasure, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
As always, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.